Tempest in Teyvat, Rimuru's Elemental Odyssey by KabirSingh808. Shadows of Rimuru. As Rimuru, Ether, and Paimon made their way toward Rimuru through the chasm, the atmosphere was noticeably lighter compared to the oppressive depths they had just escaped. The air, though still carrying a hint of damp earth and minerals from the underground caverns, felt fresher. The faint sounds of dripping water echoed through the tunnels as they walked along the rocky path. The eerie silence that had surrounded them before was now replaced by a quiet but natural ambiance. As they moved forward, Ether turned to Rimuru, his golden eyes reflecting curiosity. "So, what do you think they think about you?" he asked, his tone calm but inquisitive. Rimuru smirked slightly. "I know for sure that they don't have any ill intentions. They're just trying to protect their nation too, which is understandable. But still, they should remain vigilant. There are many things in this world that can take a human's life in an instant. Just look at what happened in the chasm." Ether nodded in agreement, his thoughts lingering on the dangers they had faced. "Well, you're not wrong." Paimon, who had been floating beside them, sighed dramatically. Let's just get this over with. We need to hurry to Rimuru. Since the god of Dendro is considered the god of wisdom, she might have answers to all your questions." Rimuru chuckled at Paimon's impatience. "Yes, I know, Paimon. Don't worry, we'll get there soon." Their path led them toward a familiar cave, the same one Rimuru had traveled through before, the place where he had been pulled into a dreamscape and met Rukkhadevata. As they reached the cave's entrance, its rocky mouth stood before them like an ancient gateway, dimly lit by faint greenish-blue light emitting from small bioluminescent fungi growing along the walls. "Well then, let's go," Rimuru said as he took the first step inside. Ether and Paimon nodded, following closely behind. As they walked deeper into the cavern, the air grew cooler, and the echoes of their footsteps resonated through the space. The uneven stone walls shimmered faintly from the moisture, and the occasional sound of distant water droplets added to the cave's mysterious ambiance. After about a minute of walking, they finally reached the cave's exit, a large, arching opening bathed in soft golden light. As they stepped outside, a breathtaking view unfolded before them. Towering trees stretched high into the sky, their massive canopies forming a natural roof that filtered the sunlight, casting dappled patterns on the forest floor. The entire region was blanketed in lush greenery, vibrant flowers blooming in every direction, filling the air with a sweet, earthy aroma. The sound of rustling leaves and distant bird calls echoed through the forest, creating a peaceful yet lively atmosphere. The most striking feature, however, was the statue of the seven standing atop a massive rock formation, overlooking the entire forest as if guarding it. The statue depicted the Dendro Archon, arms hugging a stone ball and sitting on leaves in a graceful pose, with intricate carvings that reflected the essence of wisdom and nature. Green energy swirled around the statue's base, signifying its deep connection to the land. Rimuru took in the sight with a calm expression. "So, this is Rimuru," he muttered, the vibrant scenery reminding him of Jura Tempest, though the environment here felt older, as if it carried the weight of centuries of knowledge and history. Ether crossed his arms, looking at the vast expanse ahead. "It really is different from the other nations we've visited." Paimon, meanwhile, had her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Wow, it's so green and beautiful. Look at all these trees. It's like an endless forest." Rimuru chuckled at Paimon's reaction. "Well, Rimuru is known for its deep connection to nature, so this isn't too surprising." As Ether and Paimon took their first steps forward into Rimuru suddenly spoke. "Wait." The firm tone in his voice made Ether and Paimon stop in their tracks, turning back toward him. "Now what?" Paimon whined, crossing her arms. "We're finally here. What's the holdup this time?" Rimuru, however, remained calm, his golden eyes glinting with an unreadable expression. "Before we go any further into this nation, I need to give you something, Ether." Hearing his name, Ether blinked in surprise. "Me?" Rimuru nodded. Slowly, he lifted his right hand, and from within, a dark, glimmering shape began to emerge. A blade materialized before them, its form solidifying from pure energy into polished steel. The sword was perfectly balanced, with a hilt that seemed crafted just for Ether's grip. Its edge gleamed under the Sumerian sunlight, and faint engravings shimmered along the blade's surface, as if pulsating with hidden power. Rimuru gripped the sword firmly, then extended it toward Ether. "Take this." Ether hesitated, then slowly reached out, wrapping his fingers around the hilt. The moment he touched it, a strange warmth spread through his hand, as if the weapon recognized its wielder. "What is this for?" Ether asked, examining the blade closely. Rimuru's expression darkened slightly. "I have a suspicion that this nation is going to be troublesome." He glanced toward the dense forest ahead. "And after what happened in the chasm, I don't want to take any risks. While I have no intention of leaving you too, if a situation ever arises where you need power that can rival even that of an archon, this sword will help you." Ether's golden eyes widened slightly, and he tightened his grip on the weapon. Paimon, hovering beside them, tilted her head. "But, it's just a sword, isn't it? How is it gonna give Ether power strong enough to rival an archon?" Ether, still observing the sword, suddenly noticed something unusual. He turned the weapon slightly, inspecting the hilt. There, embedded into the metal, were two small holes, perfectly circular and placed symmetrically on either side of the guard. His expression shifted. "Wait, these two holes." Seeing his realization, Rimuru smirked. "Yes. This is the same sword you used when you fought against Azathoth in front of the seal, and when you trained with A." Ether looked up, startled. "But it's a little different." Paimon floated closer, her eyes narrowing as she examined the weapon. "Yeah, now that you mention it, this looks kinda different from what he used before." Rimuru chuckled, his smirk widening. "Of course it's different. With the help of Seal, I've upgraded it. Now, it's much more powerful and easier for you to handle." As he spoke, he summoned two small, shimmering blue spheres in his palm. They pulsed with an ethereal glow, releasing a faint yet overwhelming energy that made the air around them tremble slightly. Rimuru held them out toward Ether. "You know where these go, right?" Ether nodded, glancing at the two holes in the hilt. He reached out and carefully took the glowing spheres into his hands. The moment they made contact with his skin, a soft hum resonated from within them, as if acknowledging their new wielder. Rimuru's expression turned serious. "These aren't just ordinary energy cores. These contain the combined power of myself, Seal, Ojal, and Basht." Ether's fingers tightened around the spheres, and even Paimon gasped. Wait, that's insane. You're giving him that much power." Rimuru nodded. "Once you inlay them into the sword, you'll gain a level of strength that can match even an archon. However," he raised a finger, his tone firm, "these orbs only contain a limited amount of energy. If you use them recklessly, they'll run out. So only activate them when absolutely necessary." Ether studied the spheres in his hands, then looked back at Rimuru. "I understand. I'll use them wisely." Paimon, still awestruck, suddenly grinned. "Whoa, this is so cool. Now we can fight anyone." Rimuru laughed. "I wouldn't recommend that. If you just go around using it for every small fight, you'll drain its energy in no time." Ether gave a small smile, nodding as he sheathed the sword at his waist and safely stored the two energy spheres for later use. Rimuru then turned back toward the path ahead, the dense Sumerian forest stretching endlessly before them. "All right then, let's go." As the group walked through the dense foliage of Sumeru's rainforest, the vibrant greenery surrounded them in every direction. The trees stood tall, their thick canopies casting dancing shadows across the ground. Exotic birds chirped from above, while faint traces of sunlight peeked through the leaves, illuminating the soft mist in the air. After a few moments of walking, they spotted a tall woman with short, light green hair neatly braided at the top. She wore one of the signature uniforms of the Sumeru Academia, a design commonly seen on high-ranking scholars. A pair of thin-framed glasses rested on her nose, and her sharp gaze was locked onto the book she held in one hand as she walked with purpose. Paimon, seeing an opportunity, quickly floated forward and called out, "Hey there. We're not from around here, and we're looking for the way to Sumeru City. Can you tell us which way to go?" She waited for a response, but the woman didn't even glance at them. She simply continued walking, her eyes never leaving the pages of her book as if she hadn't heard them at all. Paimon huffed, crossing her arms. "Huh, how rude." Rimuru chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Don't worry about it, she might be busy with something important." Paimon pouted. "Well, yeah, but still. She could have at least said something instead of ignoring us like that." Rimuru, still amused, turned his gaze forward. "Forget about her. We should head to Gondarvieville first." Ether glanced at him. "Gondarvieville?" Rimuru nodded. It used to be a resting place for academia scholars, but now it's the base of operations for the forest rangers. It's the perfect place to gather information before heading to Rimuru City. Paimon frowned. Why? Can't we just go straight to Rimuru City? Rimuru's expression darkened slightly. As I said before, I have a bad feeling about this. If there's even the slightest chance that something is wrong in the city, we need to know beforehand. The forest rangers might have some insight on anything unusual happening there. Paimon hesitated before sighing. Fine, fine. If you say so, then okay. But I hope this isn't another unnecessary detour. The group pressed on, and as they neared Gondarvieville, they spotted several forest rangers on patrol, their distinct green and brown uniforms blending seamlessly with the jungle environment. The rangers moved with trained efficiency, their sharp eyes scanning the area for any disturbances. As Rimuru, Ether, and Paimon approached, one of the rangers noticed them and stepped forward. Hello there. Are you here for something? Rimuru gave a polite nod. Yes, we're just passing through and wanted to ask about Rimuru City. The ranger smiled. Ah, so you're looking for directions. No problem. Before he could finish, another voice cut through the air. Oh, you want to go to Rimuru City? The group turned to the source of the voice. A tall figure with fox-like ears, a long dark green ponytail, and striking teal-colored eyes walked toward them. He wore the signature outfit of a forest watcher, complete with a cape and intricate patterns woven into his garments. It was none other than Tighnari. He approached the ranger first, his sharp gaze focused on him. Did you finish the task I assigned you? The forest ranger straightened. Well, I was about to, but these travelers asked me for directions, so. Tighnari sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. I see. In that case, I'll handle them. You go and finish your assignment. The ranger nodded before hurrying off, leaving Tighnari alone with the group. He turned to them, studying them for a moment before speaking. So, you want to go to Rimuru City? Rimuru, Ether, and Paimon all nodded. Tighnari nodded back. Then follow me. He turned and led them toward the large, treehouse-like structures of Gondarvieville, where wooden platforms and rope bridges connected the elevated homes. The scent of damp earth mixed with something more potent, the rich, calming aroma of incense drifting through the air. As they walked deeper into the settlement, Tighnari suddenly stopped and turned to face them. Wait here a moment. The group complied as he looked toward the dense forest and began explaining the directions. To reach Rimuru City, you'll have to take this route. As everyone focused on his instructions, Rimuru suddenly heard Ciel's urgent voice in his mind. Master, Ether's condition is worsening. Rimuru's eyes widened slightly. He immediately turned toward Ether, who looked pale, his golden eyes struggling to stay open. His breathing was slow, his body swaying slightly as exhaustion overtook him. Then, before anyone could react, Ether collapsed. Rimuru instantly moved, catching Ether before he hit the ground. Ether. Paimon gasped in shock, floating closer. What happened to him? Tighnari's ears twitched, and he quickly knelt beside Ether, checking his pulse and temperature. His expression turned serious. This isn't just fatigue. Something is affecting him. Rimuru clenched his jaw. Ciel, what's happening to him? Ciel's voice answered immediately. The incense in the air is affecting him. I recommend administering a full potion immediately. Without hesitation, Rimuru raised his hand, and a small bottle materialized in his palm. The liquid inside glowed with a faint, blue shimmer. He uncorked it and gently pressed the bottle to Ether's lips, allowing him to drink. Tighnari narrowed his eyes. What are you doing? Rimuru didn't look at him. I know what I'm doing. This will stabilize him. Also, can you stop the incense? It's the cause of his condition. Tighnari's expression flickered with curiosity. How do you know that? But rather than question further, he stood and walked into one of the wooden houses. Moments later, the scent in the air faded. Meanwhile, Ether drifted into unconsciousness. His vision blurred until everything around him became darkness. Ether found himself standing before a massive tree, its glowing branches stretching like infinitely into the void. Erminsel. His golden eyes widened. This is the same tree. Rimuru had spoken about this before. When he met Rukkhadevata, he had seen this place too. And then, a voice. A soft, fading whisper. The world, forget me. Ether froze. That voice. He turned toward the massive tree, Recognizing the same words he had heard before, Rimuru mentioned this too. World, forget me. Just as he began to process this realization, his vision suddenly darkened. Ether's senses gradually returned as he heard familiar voices. Is he going to be okay? Paimon's worried voice asked. Don't worry, Rimuru reassured her. I took immediate action. He just needs some mental rest, that's all. Ether's eyes fluttered open as he slowly regained consciousness. The familiar scent of fresh herbs and wood filled his nostrils, mixed with the faint traces of the incense that had previously overwhelmed him. As his vision adjusted, he found himself lying on a soft bed, the gentle sway of the wooden platform beneath him confirming that he was inside one of the treehouses built by the forest rangers of Gandharvaville. The dim glow of lanterns illuminated the room, casting soft shadows on the wooden walls. Standing nearby were three familiar figures, Rimuru, Tighnari, and Paimon. However, there was also someone new. She was a young girl with short, wavy light green hair that reached her shoulders, and striking purple eyes, almost magenta in hue. She had a reserved expression, but there was a kind curiosity in her gaze. Ether instinctively felt that she wasn't someone threatening. As he pushed himself up into a sitting position, Paimon quickly flew closer, her tiny hands on her hips as she huffed, finally. You're awake. You really gave Paimon a scare back there. Ether rubbed his forehead, still feeling slightly dazed. What happened to me? He asked, his voice a little hoarse. Rimuru crossed his arms and answered, nothing much. You just passed out because of the incense. His tone was calm, yet there was an undertone of concern. Tighnari, who had been silently observing, took a step forward and added, yes. These incenses are commonly used by scholars to aid in their meditation when they retreat into isolated areas, especially in the nearby forest. One of those was also burning here when you arrived, which is most likely what caused you to faint. Ether nodded, slowly piecing things together. He had indeed felt something strange when they entered the area, but he hadn't expected it to affect him so severely. Any discomfort? Tighnari asked, watching him carefully for any lingering symptoms. Ether took a moment to assess himself. Surprisingly, aside from a slight grogginess, he felt completely fine. No, I feel all good. Tighnari gave him a thoughtful look before reaching into his pouch and pulling out the same incense that had been burning earlier. He carefully relit it, letting the faint trails of aromatic smoke drift through the air. Try breathing normally, he instructed. Let me know if you feel the same effects as before. Ether hesitated at first but did as he was told. A few seconds passed, then a minute. Yet, nothing happened. He blinked in surprise. I don't feel anything. Tighnari furrowed his brows and turned to Rimuru. Interesting. It seems whatever medicine you gave him neutralized the effects. Rimuru smirked slightly. Of course, it did. I wouldn't give him something unreliable. Tighnari narrowed his eyes, his curiosity piqued. May I ask, where exactly did you get this medicine from? Rimuru leaned against the nearby wooden post, keeping his expression neutral. Well, let's just say it's one of the specialties from my homeland. Tighnari crossed his arms. And where exactly is this homeland of yours? Before the conversation could go any further, a soft fluttering sound caught their attention. A dusk bird, with its delicate golden-brown feathers, landed gracefully on the wooden railing outside the room. Tighnari's sharp eyes immediately locked onto it. Without a word, he walked over, gently retrieving the small rolled parchment attached to the bird's leg. He unrolled it and quickly scanned its contents. The moment he finished reading, he sighed heavily, pinching the bridge of his nose. Not again. Rimuru, noticing the frustrated expression on his face, asked, what happened? Tighnari rolled up the parchment and tucked it into his pocket. It's about a scholar named Hapasia. She's been meditating in the nearby forest for several days now, but it seems she forgot to bring enough rations. She hasn't eaten for days and is now asking for assistance. Rimuru raised an eyebrow. Meditating for days without food. That's really something. Tighnari nodded. Yes. Prolonged meditation without proper nourishment can have serious consequences on one's health. That's why scholars usually prepare rations in advance. But Hapasia, being the way she is, seems to have forgotten this time. At that moment, Rimuru's expression changed slightly, as if he had just realized something. Wait a second, does this Hapasia happen to have short green hair and wear glasses? Tainari looked at him with mild surprise. Yes. Have you met her? Rimuru exchanged a glance with Paimon before nodding. Yeah, we saw her when we first entered Sumeru. She was walking by, completely ignoring us. Paimon huffed, crossing her arms. Yeah, she didn't even glance at us when Paimon asked for directions. So rude. Tainari let out a small chuckle. She was probably deep in her meditation at that time. When scholars enter a certain state of focus, they become unaware of their surroundings. That's likely why she ignored you. Rimuru sighed. Figures. As Tainari finished explaining Hapasia's situation, he sighed and shook his head. I need to reach out to her immediately, he said, glancing towards the forest. You all should wait here, I'll be back in some time. Rimuru, leaning casually against the wooden railing, tilted his head slightly. Why don't we just go with you? We're heading to Sumeru City anyway. Tainari quickly shook his head. Oh, you don't have to worry about that. I'll take care of it myself. You all should rest here for now. His tone was firm but polite, clearly trying to avoid troubling them. Without waiting for a response, he turned and entered the house they had just stepped out of, emerging moments later with a bag full of food. With practiced ease, he adjusted the strap over his shoulder and then, without another word, began running towards the dense forest, disappearing into the trees. Paimon floated in place, arms crossed as she huffed. Well, what do we do now? Ether watched the direction Tainari had gone, his brows furrowing slightly. Why do I feel like he's hiding something? He murmured. Before anyone could answer, a soft, feminine voice spoke from behind them. You don't have to worry about that. He's always like this. The group turned toward the source of the voice and saw the same emerald-haired girl from earlier. She had an air of calmness around her, her magenta eyes warm but reserved. Paimon tilted her head. Huh, and who are you? The girl placed a hand on her chest and gave a polite nod. Oh, I'm sorry for not introducing myself earlier. My name is Kalei. Ether nodded in acknowledgement. Nice to meet you, Kalei. She smiled slightly before explaining, Master Tainari didn't mean to be secretive, he just doesn't want to disturb our guests. That's the kind of person he is. Rimuru observed her for a moment before speaking. I see. So, Kalei, you're also a forest ranger. She nodded enthusiastically. Yes, I am. But I'm still in training under Master Tainari. Rimuru chuckled. I see, so you're his student. Kalei hesitated for a moment before asking, I actually wanted to ask you something. Are you the travelers that helped during the Mondstadt crisis? Paimon instantly brightened up, puffing her chest with pride. Yep, that's us. But, how do you know about that? Kalei smiled softly. I'm friends with Amber from Mondstadt. We write letters to each other regularly, and she's told me a lot about you all. Ether's eyes lit up at the mention of Amber. Ah, I see. Amber. It's been quite some time since we last visited Mondstadt. Rimuru nodded in agreement. Then, turning his gaze back to Kalei, he asked, So, Kalei, you're from Sumeru, right? She nodded. Yes, I was born here. Rimuru crossed his arms and thought for a moment before asking, Tell me, Kalei, is there anything unusual happening in the city? Kalei seemed thoughtful for a moment before shaking her head. Not that I can think of. But, the scholars have been more active than usual in Sumeru lately. Paimon let out an exaggerated sigh. See, you're just overthinking things. Rimuru rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, maybe you're right. Then, offering a small smile, he said, Thanks, Kalei. She waved her hand dismissively. Ah, don't worry about it. After a short pause, she suggested, Why don't we go back inside and wait for Master Tainari? The group nodded in agreement and followed her into the treehouse. As they settled inside, they engaged in casual conversation, sharing stories and laughter. Kalei even prepared some delicious pita pockets, which they enjoyed together. Time passed quickly, and just as they were beginning to wonder when Tainari would return, an unfamiliar noise came from outside. The distant sound of hurried footsteps, rustling leaves, and low murmurs reached their ears. Rimuru's expression sharpened as he sat up straight. What's going on? Kalei frowned slightly and got up. I don't know. Let me check. The group followed her as she walked towards the door. The moment they stepped outside, they were met with an unexpected scene. A group of scholars, dressed in traditional Sumeru robes, stood in the clearing, their expressions serious. At the center of the group stood a man who immediately drew attention. He had sharp orange eyes, white hair, and a fair complexion. He was adorned in a deep blue sherwani styled with beige and green decorations, and atop his head, he wore a deep blue cap with a copper 8-pointed star. The acacia terminal rested neatly against his left ear, signifying his high status. One of the scholars turned towards a nearby forest ranger and demanded, "Call Tainari at once. The Grand Sage has come to meet him." The forest ranger, standing his ground, responded, "I already told you, he's not here. Master Tainari left for some work, and I don't know when he'll return." As the ranger finished speaking, the treehouse door which was made by leaves opened, drawing everyone's attention. All eyes turned towards the figures stepping out: Kalei, Rimuru, Ether, and Paimon. Kalei took a step forward and asked, "What happened?" The scholars stiffened slightly at the sight of Rimuru, some of them shifting into a more guarded stance. The Grand Sage, however, remained composed. His gaze lingered on Rimuru for a brief moment before turning to Kalei. "Ah, Miss Kalei," he said in a smooth, authoritative voice. "I am here to speak with Tainari. Do you know where he is?" Kalei straightened her posture. "Grand Sage, it's an honor that you came all this way. But I believe Master Tainari is currently assisting a scholar who needed help. He might return in some time." One of the scholars beside the Grand Sage scoffed. "That better be the truth." The Grand Sage, unfazed, turned to the scholar with a calm but firm tone. "Keep calm. We are not here to cause a scene. Let's wait." At his words, the scholar immediately fell silent. The Grand Sage then took a step forward, directing his attention to Ether's group. His eyes studied them for a moment before he spoke. "You must be the travelers visiting every nation." Paimon blinked before floating forward with her hands on her hips. Yup, that's us." "Wait, how do you know that? Don't tell me you also have a friend in Mondstadt." The Grand Sage chuckled. No, you are simply famous. Rumors about you were bound to spread far and wide." Hearing this, Paimon puffed out her chest in pride. Then, the Grand Sage turned to Rimuru. A small smile formed on his lips as he extended his hand for a handshake. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Rimuru." Rimuru glanced at the offered hand, then smiled as he reached out to shake it. However, the moment their hands touched, Ciel's voice echoed in his mind. "Master, this Grand Sage seems to have ulterior motives." Rimuru heard her but didn't let the smile falter from his face. Keeping his usual calm demeanor, he replied, "Likewise, Grand Sage of Sumeru." The Grand Sage then turned to Ether and extended his hand as well. Ether, still keeping his guard up, returned the handshake. As they waited in the serene yet tense atmosphere of Gandharvieville, the Grand Sage, standing near Rimuru, finally broke the silence. His voice was calm, yet there was an unmistakable hint of intrigue behind his words. "May I ask you something, Mr. Rimuru?" Rimuru turned his head slightly toward the Grand Sage, keeping his usual relaxed expression. "Sure," he responded casually. The Grand Sage nodded with a knowing look. "I have heard from my sources that your knowledge is immense. It is said that the technology you provided to the divine priestess of Watatsumi Island was also one of your creations." His eyes narrowed slightly as if he were gauging Rimuru's reaction. Rimuru, already suspecting where this conversation was headed, nodded with a smile. "Yes, indeed." Upon hearing his confirmation, the Grand Sage clasped his hands together and turned fully toward Rimuru. "Then, allow me to extend an offer. We, the Academia, are engaged in crucial research regarding Irminsul and the mysterious ailments affecting our land. With a brilliant mind like yours aiding us, I am certain that we could bring the suffering of this land to an end." As he finished speaking, silence fell between them. Ether and Paimon exchanged glances. Something about this offer felt off. Rimuru, on the other hand, took a moment to process the offer. His golden eyes, though calm, hid a sharp intelligence that missed nothing. After a brief pause, he nodded slightly. "I don't mind," he said, which made the Grand Sage's lips curl ever so slightly into a smirk. However, before the Grand Sage could respond, Rimuru continued, "But, Ether and Paimon will be joining me as well." The Grand Sage's small smirk instantly faded, and his expression shifted to one of mild surprise. The surrounding scholars also reacted, some whispering among themselves. "Surely, you jest," the Grand Sage finally said, his voice maintaining its composed tone. While I acknowledge that they are capable travelers, what we require is knowledge, not physical strength. Rimuru leaned back slightly and gave a small shrug. Don't worry. They won't do anything reckless. The Grand Sage paused, clearly weighing the situation. After a moment, he sighed and shook his head. I don't think that would be possible, he said, his tone diplomatic but firm. The research we conduct at the Academia involves many of the nation's greatest secrets. Allowing outsiders access to such information would be too great a risk. If such knowledge were to be leaked, it could have dire consequences for Sumeru as a whole. Hearing this, Rimuru's smile widened slightly. Then why are you inviting me? He asked, his tone casual but sharp. I'm an outsider too, am I not? The Grand Sage's eyes gleamed for a split second, but he quickly masked it with a neutral expression. Of course, you are, he admitted. However, your abilities and knowledge far surpass the criteria that would normally bar someone from joining us. Your potential contribution to our research is invaluable. That is why, in this exceptional case, we are willing to take the risk and allow you entry. Ether furrowed his brows slightly, and Paimon looked visibly annoyed. However, the Grand Sage continued, until the research is complete, we will, of course, need to keep an eye on you. That last sentence made Rimuru's smile waver for a split second before he let out a small chuckle. I see, he said. Paimon, however, had enough. Wait. That's not fair. You're saying Rimuru is such a genius that you're willing to break your own rules, but at the same time, you're saying you don't trust him. That makes no sense, she exclaimed. The Grand Sage gave her a glance but chose not to respond. Rimuru, meanwhile, sighed. Sorry to disappoint you, Grand Sage, he said smoothly, but I'll have to decline your offer. A visible shift occurred in the atmosphere. The scholars accompanying the Grand Sage seemed taken aback. Some even looked outright offended. I know that you want my knowledge, Rimuru continued, but inviting me while acknowledging the risk of Sumeru's secrets being leaked is foolish, don't you think? At those words, the surrounding scholars erupted. How dare you say that? One of them shouted. Do you have any idea who you're speaking to? Another scholar barked. The Grand Sage knows far more than you could ever comprehend. As the scholars grew more agitated, some of the forest rangers nearby tensed, prepared to intervene if necessary. However, before the situation could escalate further, the Grand Sage raised a hand. Enough, he commanded. His tone remained calm but held an undeniable authority. The scholars immediately fell silent, though they still glared at Rimuru with hostility. The Grand Sage sighed and gave Rimuru an unreadable look. You are correct, he admitted. I cannot fault your reasoning. Just then, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from a distance. The group turned to see Tighnari sprinting toward them. His green and black hair swayed with each step, and his expression was one of urgency. Grand Sage, he called out as he stopped near the group, catching his breath. What brings you here? The Grand Sage turned to him with a small, practiced smile. I am here to formally request your assistance in our research, he explained. Tighnari exhaled sharply and shook his head. I'm honored that the Grand Sage himself came all this way, but I am merely a forest watcher. I don't think I compare to the great minds of the Academia. The Grand Sage's smile did not falter. Your master is also part of this struggle, he said smoothly. And now, he requires your aid. Tighnari narrowed his eyes. And what exactly does my master need from me? You will know once you arrive in Sumeru City. Tighnari crossed his arms, his ears twitching slightly. And how long will I be required to stay? The Grand Sage responded without hesitation, there is no definitive answer. Tighnari closed his eyes and let out a small sigh. Then I'm afraid I can't give you a proper answer either. For a brief moment, silence hung between them. The Grand Sage observed Tighnari closely, but when he saw that the Forest Watcher's resolve would not waver, he let out a resigned sigh. Very well, he said. If that is your decision, then so be it. With that, he turned to his scholars. We are leaving. As the Grand Sage and his entourage prepared to depart, he cast one final glance at Rimuru, his expression unreadable. Rimuru simply met his gaze with a calm smile. Once the Academia delegation had disappeared into the forest, Paimon exhaled loudly. That was definitely something, she muttered. Ether nodded, still deep in thought. Tighnari rubbed his temples before turning to the group. Sorry you had to deal with all that, he said. But knowing the Grand Sage, I doubt this will be the last time he tries to involve you in academia affairs. Rimuru chuckled. Oh, I expected as much. With that, the group returned to the treehouse, the conversation lingering in their minds. As they stepped inside Tainari's cozy treehouse, the soft glow of lanterns illuminated the room, casting a warm and tranquil ambiance. The gentle rustling of leaves outside mixed with the distant calls of wildlife, creating a peaceful atmosphere. The forest ranger sighed as he removed his gloves and stretched slightly before addressing the group. Sorry for taking so long, Tainari said, his ears twitching slightly. Kalei, who had been waiting patiently, quickly shook her head. No, Master Tainari, it's all right. There's no need to apologize, she said with a smile. Tainari gave her an approving nod before turning toward Rimuru, Ether, and Paimon. His gaze was sharp yet friendly, always observant of those around him. So, did anything happen while I was away? He asked curiously. Rimuru, leaning against the nearby wooden table, shook his head with a small smile. No, nothing happened, he replied casually. Tainari exhaled in relief. Good, he said. Then, I suppose you're going to leave now. Rimuru nodded. Yeah, thanks for everything, Tainari. Hearing this, Tainari waved his hand dismissively. Oh, don't worry about it. It's my job as a forest watcher, after all, he said with a light chuckle. However, Kalei frowned slightly at the realization. You're leaving already? She asked, disappointment evident in her voice. Ether, noticing her expression, smiled reassuringly. Don't worry, he said. We'll return to visit everyone once we finish speaking with the Dendro Archon. We need some information from her. Tainari's ears twitched at Ether's words. Oh, so you're planning to meet the Dendro Archon? He asked. Rimuru nodded. Yeah, do you know where she is? Tainari crossed his arms and leaned against the wooden railing of the room. Well, to be honest, she currently resides in the sanctuary of Surasthana, he explained. But beyond that, I can't tell you much. She hasn't made any public appearances so far. Rimuru furrowed his brows slightly at this. That's odd, he muttered. Kalei, tilting her head, added her thoughts. Maybe she just prefers being alone. She suggested. Rimuru sighed. Whatever the case is, we'll find out once we reach the city, he said. Tainari nodded in agreement. Yes, indeed. So, I suppose this is goodbye for now, he said, his tone carrying a hint of farewell. Rimuru returned the nod. Yes, let's meet again soon. Tainari gave a small smile, but then his expression shifted as he remembered something. Oh, before you go, I almost forgot to ask about that medicine you gave the traveler earlier, he said, his gaze curious. Rimuru tilted his head slightly before raising his hand, and in a small flash of light, a potion appeared in his palm. The shimmering liquid inside the bottle had a faint glow to it, giving off a mystical aura. Tainari examined the potion closely, nodding to himself. What exactly is it? He asked. Rimuru smiled. This potion can only be made by me, he stated. No one else can replicate it because the extraction process of the herbs used is something only I can perform. Besides, the herbs themselves don't even come from this world. Tainari's eyes narrowed slightly at that last statement. Wait, are you saying that these herbs aren't from Teyvat? Rimuru nodded. That's right. They come from my world. For a moment, silence filled the room as everyone processed what he had just said. Tainari's expression remained unreadable, but Kalei blinked in surprise. Wait, this is the first time I've heard of someone not being from this world, she said in astonishment. Rimuru chuckled. Well, I guess that explains why this medicine can only be made by me, he said casually. Tainari hummed in thought before his gaze shifted slightly toward Kalei. Then, I have another question, he said. Rimuru raised an eyebrow. Go ahead. Tainari hesitated for a moment before speaking. Do you think this potion could work on Kalei? At those words, Paimon's eyes widened. Wait, are you talking about her Eliezer? She asked, looking between Tainari and Kalei. Tainari nodded. Yes. Paimon gasped. Wait, why didn't we think of that sooner? She turned to Rimuru with hopeful eyes. Rimuru, however, shook his head. I don't think so, he said, his voice carrying a hint of regret. Paimon's excitement deflated instantly. Huh, why not? Rimuru sighed before explaining. While this potion is incredibly potent, it only works on physical ailments and some aspects of consciousness. Eliezer, on the other hand, is directly connected to Irminsul. Since its origins are not purely biological, I doubt this potion would have any effect on it. Paimon groaned in disappointment. Oh, that's not good, she muttered. Rimuru, noticing her reaction, gave her a reassuring smile. But don't worry, he said. I'll do my own research. If I find a way to cure Eliezer, I'll let you know immediately. Tighnari, hearing this, looked at Rimuru with newfound respect. He bowed his head slightly. I can't thank you enough for even considering that, he said sincerely. Rimuru waved him off. Don't worry about it, he said with a small grin. He then turned to Calais. And you too, Calais. I'll do my best. Calais's emerald eyes shimmered with hope. Thank you, Rimuru, she said softly. With that, Tighnari took a step back and gestured toward the door. Well then, let me at least tell you the best route to Sumeru City, he said. After giving them clear directions and some additional advice about the dangers along the way, the group finally prepared to depart. As they stepped outside, the fresh forest air filled their lungs, and the golden light of the setting sun bathed Gondarvier-ville in a warm glow. Tighnari and Calais stood by the entrance, watching them with kind expressions. Stay safe out there, Tighnari said. Rimuru nodded. We will. Until we meet again. As Rimuru, Ether, and Paimon departed from Gondarvier-ville, Tighnari watched them disappear into the thick foliage of the Avidya forest. He crossed his arms, his ears twitching slightly as he muttered to himself, what a peculiar group. Calais, standing beside him, smiled softly. Yes, they are, but also quite a happy and comforting one, she said. Tighnari nodded in agreement, then turned around. Come on, we still have work to do, he said before heading back inside. After traveling through the dense rainforest for a few minutes, Rimuru and his group finally arrived at the grand entrance of Sumeru City. The first thing that caught their attention was the breathtaking architecture, a blend of nature and civilization. Towering structures built from smooth, light-colored stone stood tall, with lush green vegetation growing along their surfaces. The city's waterways glistened under the sun, reflecting the lively hues of the bustling streets. At the heart of the city, the Academia stood tall, its grand domed structure surrounded by countless bridges and platforms. Suspended above it, resting among the highest branches of the divine tree, was the sanctuary of Surasthana, where the Dendro-Archon, Lesser Lord Kusanali, was said to reside. As they approached the entrance, Paimon stretched her arms. Finally, we made it, she exclaimed, her tiny wings flapping excitedly. Ether nodded in agreement, while Rimuru chuckled. Yeah, we should get going, he said. However, just as they were about to enter, two individuals stepped in their way. One was a Sumeru scholar, dressed in the characteristic green and gold robes of the Academia, and the other was a Sumeru city guard, clad in light armor. Excuse me, the scholar spoke in a polite yet formal tone, adjusting the glasses resting on the bridge of his nose. It looks like this is your first time visiting Sumeru City. Paimon blinked in surprise. Huh, how did you know? She asked, tilting her head. The scholar gave a knowing smile. Because there is no information about you in the Akasha, he explained. Ether and Paimon exchanged confused glances, while Rimuru remained silent, his interest piqued. But don't worry, the scholar continued, adjusting his bag. That won't prevent you from entering Sumeru City. In fact, as part of the Academia's policies, all new travelers are provided with an Akasha terminal free of charge. The scholar then held up three small green leaves-like devices resembling accessories that could be worn on the ear. This, he explained, is the last legacy of Greater Lord Rukkhadevata. After centuries of tireless research, the Academia developed these Akasha terminals, which allow users to directly connect to the Akasha system. As long as you remain within Sumeru's borders, you may use it to access an immense database of knowledge at any time. He paused for a moment before adding, however, due to technological limitations, the device functions much smoother in Sumeru City and Port Ormuz compared to other locations. Hearing this, Rimuru crossed his arms and raised an eyebrow. Ah, so it's like the internet. Ether and Paimon turned toward him in confusion. Internet, they repeated in unison. Rimuru smiled. I'll explain later. Let's hear the rest first, he said, motioning for them to listen. The scholar, pleased by their attentiveness, nodded. You all are quite fortunate, he said. In the past, Akasha terminals were only given to those who had lived in Sumeru for an extended period of time. But thanks to the new policies, every visitor is now granted one. With that, he reached into his bag and handed each of them an Akasha terminal. Here you go. Please handle them with care, he instructed. As Rimuru took the device, he immediately activated a telepathic connection with Seal. Hey, Seal, can you analyze this for me? Rimuru asked mentally. Already on it, Master, Seal responded instantly. I will provide a detailed report soon. Meanwhile, the scholar continued his explanation. To activate the Akasha terminal, simply recite this phrase. May the mighty God bless us with their wisdom. Rimuru, Ether, and Paimon exchanged glances before repeating the phrase. As soon as they spoke the words, the Akasha terminals attached themselves to their ears. Instantly, an invisible screen flickered into existence in front of their eyes, displaying an organized interface with various categories of information. The moment they looked at the scholar, a stream of text appeared before them, identifying him as Panna, a scholar from the Academia. Paimon gasped in amazement. Whoa! It just showed us information about him. She exclaimed. The scholar nodded. Exactly. The Akasha terminal grants you access to knowledge that is already recorded in our database. However, its effectiveness depends on how much information is available, he explained. Finally, he took a step back and bowed slightly. With that, I welcome you to Sumeru City. May the wisdom of the Dendro Archon always be by your side. With his introduction complete, he turned around and left. As soon as he was out of earshot, Ether sighed. Well, he definitely talked a lot, he muttered. Rimuru chuckled. You're not wrong. Paimon crossed her arms. But this thing is pretty cool. It's like having a mini guidebook inside your head, she said excitedly. However, Rimuru decided to test the Akasha terminal's search function. Closing his eyes, he focused his thoughts. How can I meet the Dendro Archon? He asked internally. A few moments passed, but nothing happened. The screen remained blank. Rimuru frowned. That's odd. It's not giving me any answers. Paimon and Ether tried the same, only to get the same result. Huh, me too, Paimon said, confused. Ether narrowed his eyes. Is there some kind of issue with these new Akasha terminals? Rimuru rubbed his chin. Unlikely. But maybe it doesn't provide vital information to newcomers. Ether nodded thoughtfully. That could be true. Rimuru sighed. Well, in that case, let's just go to the sanctuary of Surasthana directly. Hearing this, Paimon hesitated. Wait, don't you think that would be rude? She asked. Rimuru chuckled. I was just joking, of course. He smiled. Let's find some locals and ask them the proper way. With that, the group stepped further into Sumeru City, ready to uncover the next steps in their journey to meet Lesser Lord Kusanali. As the group stepped through the grand archway into Sumeru City, they were immediately met with the sight of bustling streets filled with scholars, merchants, and travelers. The air carried a mix of fresh spices and blooming flora, and the soft murmur of voices blended with the occasional distant hum of Sumeru's unique musical instruments. Bridges stretched over clear water channels, leading to beautifully carved stone buildings adorned with hanging vines and golden engravings. Ether took a moment to admire the city's unique architecture and atmosphere, then turned to Rimuru with a curious expression. So, what exactly is this internet you were talking about? He asked. Paimon, floating nearby, perked up. Oh, right. Paimon almost forgot about that, she said excitedly. Rimuru chuckled. Well, in my old world, we had something similar to the Akasha system, but it was a little different. It was called the internet, and we used devices called smartphones to access it. Smartphones, Ether repeated. Yeah, Rimuru nodded. You can think of the Akasha terminal as a type of smartphone, and the Akasha system, which provides it with knowledge, is similar to the internet in my world. Both systems essentially do the same thing. They provide instant access to information, allowing people to search for anything they need in just a few seconds, just like the Akasha does. Ether rubbed his chin thoughtfully. That does sound similar, but what's the difference? The biggest difference is scale, Rimuru explained. The Akasha system only works within Sumeru's borders, meaning you can't use it outside this region. But in my world, the internet is spread across the entire globe. No matter where you are, as long as you have a connection, you can access it. Paimon's eyes widened in amazement. Wait, so that means? Yep, Rimuru nodded. Anyone, anywhere in the world, can use the internet at any time. Paimon gasped. That's insane. That means your old world is super advanced. Rimuru smiled. You could say that. Ether, still intrigued, asked, so what does this smartphone look like? Is it the same as the Akasha terminal? Rimuru shook his head. No, it's actually a small, rectangular device, usually made of glass and metal. You can carry it in your pockets or bags, and instead of placing it on your ear like the Akasha terminal, you use your hands to interact with it. The screen lights up, and you can tap on it to open different apps or search for information. Ether nodded. I see. Paimon crossed her arms. HMPH, that sounds pretty cool. But Paimon still thinks the Akasha is a bit more convenient. After all, you don't have to hold it in your hands. Rimuru chuckled. That's true, but the internet has a lot more freedom. As they talked, they continued walking deeper into Sumeru City, taking in the sights and sounds of the bustling metropolis. The city was alive with activity. Books, scholars and students from the academia were scattered throughout, some engaged in heated debates, while others quietly studied scrolls and tomes under the shade of large palm trees. The smell of exotic herbs and spices drifted through the air, mixing with the earthy scent of aged parchment. Amphora merchants and vendors called out to passers-by, their stalls lined with handmade jewelry, enchanted artifacts, and rare Sumeru delicacies. A group of children laughed as they ran past, playing with small dendro-infused toys that floated above the ground. Musical notes in the distance, the soft melody of Sumeru's traditional instruments played, adding to the peaceful yet scholarly atmosphere of the city. As they walked, Rimuru glanced up at the massive sanctuary of Surasthana, nestled high above the Academia in the Divine Tree. That's where Lesser Lord Kusanali resides, he thought to himself. Turning to the others, Rimuru said, let's go find Catherine. She might know how we can meet Lesser Lord Kusanali. Ether nodded in agreement. That's a good idea. If anyone knows where to start, it's her. Yep, Paimon chimed in. The Adventurers Guild always has good information. Rimuru, Ether, and Paimon arrived at the Adventurers Guild in Sumeru City, where the ever-reliable Catherine was stationed behind the counter. The golden insignia of the guild shone brightly under the gentle daylight, reflecting the city's intellectual and mystical atmosphere. Before they could approach, however, a voice echoed in Rimuru's mind. Master, I wanted to talk about something, Seal spoke with a calm yet serious tone. Rimuru glanced at Ether and Paimon. You two go ahead and ask about Lesser Lord Kusanali. Seal has a report she wants to give me. Ether gave him a nod. All right, we'll see what we can find out. Yeah, Paimon bets Catherine knows a thing or two. Paimon said enthusiastically before they headed toward the counter. As the two walked away, Rimuru focused inward. All right, Seal, what happened? Ciel's response came swiftly. Master, I believe asking the Akasha system about Lesser Lord Kusanali will be useless. Rimuru's brows furrowed. Why? What's wrong? It appears that someone has purposefully sealed certain information within the Akasha. This seal prevents any attempts to access or extract data related to Lesser Lord Kusanali. I have tried every possible method to bypass it, but the lock is too intricate. It will take time before I can break through it. Rimuru's expression darkened. I see. I can understand if she doesn't want to interact with people, but to go this far, or is this something entirely different? It is possible. Given this level of interference, I advise caution around the Academia. Rimuru crossed his arms, deep in thought. Understood. Keep working on breaking the seal and let me know the moment you uncover anything. Yes, Master. I will notify you immediately. Just as their conversation ended, Rimuru noticed Ether and Paimon returning from their inquiry. Ether's expression was serious. So, what did you find out? Rimuru sighed, relaying what Seal had told him. Paimon frowned. That is definitely odd. Ether nodded. Either the Academia is hiding something, or someone doesn't want people asking about the Dendro Archon. Either way, we should keep our guard up. Paimon sighed. Yeah, I don't want anything unusual happening now, not after what happened in the chasm. Rimuru hummed in agreement. Just as they were about to leave the area, something caught their attention, or rather, someone. A short distance away, they saw a young woman dressed in a light blue dress with a purple top adorned with golden accents. Her brunette hair was braided into a low bun, and she wore a gold lazurite crown, a matching necklace, and gold earrings. Bandages wrapped around her arms, and her brown eyes darted nervously around as if she were trying to avoid someone. Rimuru's sharp gaze immediately noticed something concerning: the aura surrounding her skin, the slight discoloration. Elazar. Just like Kalei, but hers is in the final stages. Before he could say anything, several eremites ran past, their eyes scanning the crowd. The woman pressed herself against a wall, trying to stay hidden. The moment they left, she let out a relieved sigh, only to tense up as a voice spoke behind her. "What are you doing, miss?" She spun around instantly, her body rigid with fear, only to see a blue-haired stranger, Rimuru, standing calmly behind her. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. "You gave me a fright," she muttered, still catching her breath. Rimuru's gaze lowered to her bandages again. It was worse than he initially thought. Before he could say anything about it, she spoke. "I was just trying to hide from them." Rimuru narrowed his eyes slightly. "And why would you need to hide?" She hesitated, her expression conflicted. Before she could answer, however, she glanced past Rimuru and saw the eremites returning. Panic flashed in her eyes. "Can you please help me? I will tell you everything afterward." Rimuru exhaled through his nose, then nodded. He raised a hand and created a clone, which immediately transformed into a perfect replica of Dunyazard. "You know what to do," Rimuru said. The clone nodded and took off in the opposite direction. The moment the eremites saw Dunyazard, they shouted, "Hey, there she is! Miss Dunyazard is over there. Let's catch her, her father must be worried." The group of mercenaries immediately gave chase, disappearing down the street. Rimuru turned back to the real Dunyazard, who was watching in awe. "Now," he said, "let's talk." Dunyazard sighed but quickly glanced around. "Not here. Let's go somewhere safe first." Ether and Paimon exchanged glances but followed without question as Rimuru and Dunyazard led the way toward the city's tavern. Inside the tavern, the group found a quiet corner. Dunyazard sat down immediately, huffing from even that short run. Paimon floated nearby. "Are you okay?" "I'll be fine," she muttered, taking a deep breath. "At least those eremites won't find me here." But before the conversation could continue, Rimuru's instincts flared. Without turning around, he lifted a hand and caught someone's wrist, their nails mere inches from Ether's neck. The tavern fell silent. Rimuru slowly turned his head, his expression unreadable. "You've got some nerve attacking us like this." The assailant quickly retreated, landing a few feet away. A feminine voice responded, smooth yet laced with danger. "You've got good reflexes." Rimuru turned fully to face her. The woman standing before him had lightly tanned skin, sharp sky blue eyes with yellow, cat-eye, pupils, and dusky blonde accented dark brown hair. Dihaya. Rimuru's hand instinctively moved toward his katana, but before he could draw it. "Wait, she's Dihaya. Don't hurt her." Dunyazard stood up, her voice urgent. Ether looked at Dunyazard. "You know her?" Dunyazard nodded. "She's my bodyguard." Dihaya, still watching Rimuru warily, finally spoke. "Who are these two, my lady?" "They're my new friends," Dunyazard replied. "They helped me escape from your group." Dihaya's expression darkened slightly. "I see." She folded her arms. "In that case, you all should scram. There's nothing for you here." Rimuru narrowed his eyes. "And why would we do that?" Dihaya's gaze sharpened. "Are you challenging me?" Rimuru met her stare without hesitation. "And what if I am?" The atmosphere in the tavern immediately dropped. The tension was thick, suffocating. Even the other patrons fell silent, nervously glancing at the two. Just before the situation could escalate, Dunyazard stepped between them. "Dihaya, stand down. I promised them I would answer their questions if they helped me." Dihaya sighed. "But as your bodyguard, it is my duty to bring you home. Your parents are worried." Dunyazard frowned. "And what if I don't want to go?" "Then I'll carry you like a sack of potatoes over my shoulder," Dihaya said flatly. Paimon huffed. "Hey, she said she doesn't want to go. Why are you forcing her?" Rimuru stepped forward. "She also promised to answer our questions. So, I hope you can wait in line for your turn." Dihaya's eyes gleamed dangerously. "Stay out of this." Rimuru crossed his arms. "We can't. The information we need is important." Dihaya smirked. "And what could that information possibly be?" Paimon answered. We want to meet Lesser Lord Kusanali. Dunyazard's eyes lit up. You want to know about Lesser Lord Kusanali? I would be happy to tell you. Dihaya frowned. No, you can't. We are going home. She reached for Dunyazard's hand, but Rimuru stepped in front of her. Step aside, Dihaya warned, if you don't want to get hurt. Rimuru's gaze turned sharp. That's not happening. The two locked eyes, the tavern growing silent once more. To be continued.